This is Today 95.1 FM, Port Harcourt. News.
Hello and good evening. This is the World News on your premium talk radio Today 95.1 FM Port Harcourt. I am Faustina Oputu. And the headlines. Federal government condemns Canadian court declaring political parties in Nigeria terrorist organizations. Rivers State government announces plans to establish emergency management agency. Residents raise alarm over suspected monkeypox outbreak in Orashi region. On the foreign scene, UN says war crimes are likely committed in Syria coastal violence. Details in a moment. And now the details of the news. The federal government has condemned a recent ruling by Canadian Federal Court which classified certain Nigerian political parties as terrorist organizations, calling the decision reckless, unfounded, and an unacceptable interference in the country's internal affairs. This was contained in a statement signed by the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Kimebi Benyifa. The ruling delivered in connection with an immigration case involving a Nigerian, Douglas Egariba, who arrived in Canada in 2017 seeking refugee status, labeled some Nigerian political organizations as having terrorist links. The government insisted that the judgment failed to distinguish between individuals who may have committed offences and the broader membership of legitimate political entities. The federal government emphasized that its political system is governed by a robust legal and constitutional framework and that all recognized political parties operate within the law. Officials warned that the ruling could foster misinformation and incite unnecessary tensions. The ministry called on Canadian authorities to immediately reverse the decision and avoid endorsing politically motivated narratives that misrepresent Nigeria's political landscape. Meanwhile, the All Progressives Congress has dismissed claims that a Canadian court labelled the party a terrorist organization. In a statement, APC's National Publicity Secretary, Felix Moka, clarified that the court made no pronouncement on terrorism in its ruling. This follows reports by some media outlets alleging that the Canadian court had declared both the APC and the People's Democratic Party as terrorist organizations. APC called on its members, supporters and Nigerians at large to disregard the reports, describing them as false and misleading. Morka stressed that claims of a Canadian court declaring the APC a terrorist organization are blatantly false and, at best, deliberately misleading. The APC further noted that any such decision would have been entirely meaningless, as it would lack jurisdiction and hold no extraterritorial relevance or legal effect. The senator representing Sokoto South, Aminu Tambuwal, has vowed never to join the All Progressives Congress. Tambuwal, a member of the opposition coalition, said he has no interest in seeking political forgiveness of sins. Addressing his supporters upon his return to Sokoto, the former state governor said he cannot join the APC because it does not want his sins forgiven. The former Sokoto state governor maintained that the political landscape in Nigeria is sharply divided between those with President Bola Tinubu and his government and those with the people of Nigeria, stressing that he has chosen to stand with the people. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, the EFCC, had detained Tambuwal in Abuja over alleged fraudulent withdrawal of cash to the tune of 189 billion naira. The House of Representatives Ad Hoc Committee on the Oversight of the Sole Administrative Governance in the state. The committee, led by House Leader and Chairman Professor Julius Inhombere, was in Rivers State on a courtesy visit and inspection tour as part of its oversight mandate. Speaking during the visit, Inhombere said the National Assembly was encouraged by the sole administrator's achievements so far and remained committed to ensuring the return of democratic rule. Ahead of the August 30, 2025 local government council elections in Rivers State, stakeholders have gathered in Port Harcourt to emphasize the protection of the sanctity of the democratic process while keeping communities safe, united and forward-looking. Speaking on the theme, The Rivers We Want, Strengthening Local Governance Through Dialogue and Participation, convener of the Rivers Peace Initiative, Obinna Ebogidi, said the town hall meeting was more than just a gathering. It was a call to conscience and a reminder of what people can achieve when they choose dialogue over division and peace over conflict. Ebogidi explained that the forum was designed to provide a platform for citizens to learn how to disagree without becoming enemies and to compete without tearing apart the social fabric. He stressed that togetherness is key to navigating the big question of how to strengthen participation in the forthcoming local government elections while ensuring peace and unity.
It is about the dignity of the Rivers person, about protecting the sanctity of our democratic process while keeping our communities safe, united and forward-looking. It's about proving that we can disagree without being enemies and we can compete without destroying the very fabric of our society. We are honored to have some of the most respected and thoughtful minds in our state here as panelists and at such a time as this. I'm also certain that your participation today will give clarity to what our research is doing as soon as the date for the election draws closer. To every one of you present, physically and online, thank you for making the time to be here.
In his remarks, the Oba of Ogbaland, His Eminence, Eze Nwachukwu Namobi, expressed concern that Rivers State had reached its current state because a few sons decided to fight dirty. The monarch called on the people to support any initiative that would help restore peace and the democratic system and commended the organizers for hosting the town hall meeting.
Know that now those who have refused to hear before are beginning to listen and will have an opportunity at a shot for peace where everybody can begin to do a rethink and a remanage. That is why I believe the time is right when we begin to reconsider going back to the normal situation. Rivers State has suffered over this period of madness. A lot is lost. A lot has gone benign, capable of yet creating problems. But I believe that if we begin to do the right things now, it will all go well.
On his part, the Commissioner in charge of Administration and Legal Services at the Rivers State Independent Electoral Commission, RISIEC, Professor Chidi Halliday, dismissed insinuations that results for the forthcoming council elections had already been written and were awaiting declaration.
Not all political parties win an election. Not even all political parties participate. And that's the misunderstanding of the role of political parties. You can have a political party that is engaged in civic education. If you let's take a walk to the United States of America. It's the only two political parties that is in the United States of America. We don't know that the political parties are in their hundreds. Some play in their own little space. And when we have this kind of feelings, is what brought us to where we are. And we should not work on that. The RISIEC is open to you. He is a candidate. I guess even the Labour Party.
Today FM correspondent Uchendu Ejowo reports that representatives of civil society organizations, political parties and other stakeholders, including the Rivers State Police Command, that outlined the strategies put in to ensure credible elections were present at the meeting. The sole administrator of Rivers State, retired Vice Admiral Ibokete Ibas, says the state government is working to establish the Rivers State Emergency Management Agency. According to Ibas, the Emergency Management Agency will take over the responsibilities of the Central Working Committee on Emergency Preparedness, Flood Management and Control. He explained that the government is engaging the federal government and international partners to mobilize resources resources for improved flood management systems, covering pre-flood measures, interventions during flooding, and post-flood recovery projects, as well as early warning infrastructure. Speaking during a sensitization campaign of the Central Working Committee on Flood Management and Control at the Obiwali International Conference Center, Port Harcourt, Eba said the initiative forms part of the state's proactive strategy to mitigate flooding through awareness, prevention, preparedness, and community participation. Represented by the Secretary to the State Government, Professor Ibibia Warika, the sole administrator urged the committee to go beyond responding to disasters and instead anticipate vulnerable areas, reduce the impact of flooding, and equip residents with the knowledge and tools to protect themselves.
Floods are not new to us, especially here in Rivers State. For years, they have ravaged our communities, displaced families, destroyed farmlands, and disrupted livelihoods. What is new and what gives me hope and confidence is our renewed determination to address this challenge in a proactive, coordinated, and inclusive manner. The Committee on Flood Emergency Preparedness, Management and Control is at the heart of this mission. Your task is not merely to respond to disasters after they happen, but to anticipate the disaster areas, mitigate their impact, and empower our people with the knowledge and tools that they need to protect themselves.
Ebas noted that effective flood management requires collaboration between the public sector, local communities, civil society, and the private sector, as government alone cannot tackle the challenge. You're listening to the World News on Today95.1 FM, Voice of the People. After the break, more news, foreign and sports stories. Do stay tuned.
Every day, every hour, when the big stories break, depend on our 24-hour news team to bring you the latest. Today, 95.1 FM.
Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back to the rest of the stories. The people of the Orashi region have raised concerns over what they allege to be an outbreak of monkeypox, also known as mpox. The Orashi region comprises Ogba Igbemandoni, Abua Odwa, Ahoda East and Ahoda West local government areas of River State. Speaking with Today FM's Ifunanya Obemendukwe, an indigene of Ahoda East local government area, stated that suspected cases of monkeypox were first noticed in Obagi community in Ogba Igbemandoni LGA about 3 weeks ago. According to the source, an alert has been circulated among at least 10 neighboring communities surrounding Obagi. She called on the River State government to urgently mobilize resources and distribute monkeypox vaccines to rural communities, particularly to primary healthcare facilities in Ahoda East and West, Ogba Igbemandoni, and Abua LGAs.
As 3 weeks ago, there was the information from Obagi, and the health centers then can confirm the outbreak of the mpox virus. For now, the alert is on for the over 10 communities around Obagi. So they've actually alerted people, but they are aware of the vaccine, the mpox vaccine, but so far it has not been sent to the local areas, to the rural areas. My call to them is for them to immediately mobilize their workers, the healthcare workers, to bring the vaccines down to the rural areas, and the health centers in Ahoda, in Onelga, in Abua, Ahoda East and West. So that's the area where the outbreak.
When Today FM contacted the River State Ministry of Health, a source who spoke on condition of anonymity said no official alert had been sent to the ministry, explaining that its response teams do not move to locations until cases are confirmed. Monkeypox, now officially known as mpox, presents symptoms similar to chickenpox but is more painful and highly contagious. Meanwhile, the River State Primary Healthcare Management Board has begun administering monkeypox vaccines at the River State University Teaching Hospital, formerly known as BMH, the immunization unit of the University of Port Harcourt Teaching Hospital, UPTH, and the sick bay of the Primary Healthcare Management Board. Colonel Ogumerum Eke and members of his family have condemned individuals allegedly behind what they describe as misleading reports distorting the facts of their legal dispute with impostors over the Agbada Esilaru land located along New Airport Road in Obiakpo local government area, Rivers State. In a statement, the family dismissed the actions of the alleged impostors as the last kick of a dying horse and a storm in a teacup, reaffirming that all legal matters regarding ownership of the land have been resolved in their favor. According to Precious DK, head of media and publicity for the family's legal team, the ownership dispute was first decided by the Choba Customary Court, which ruled in favor of Colonel AK and his family. DK explained that related questions such as whether the land falls within an urban or rural area and the validity of the judgment were resolved through judicial review proceedings filed by the Rumosi community, led by Ernest Wogo Ihunda, again in favor of the AK family. DK further stated that where the legality of judgment execution against the judgment debtors was challenged by Wogo Ihunda and his alleged land-grabbing associates, the court once more upheld the AK family's rights to the property. He alleged that the judgment debtors, in a bid to deprive the family of their inheritance, fabricated criminal charges against Colonel AK over the lawful enforcement of the court's rulings, but noted that on July 1, 2025, the court charged and acquitted him of what DK described as trumped-up charges. The statement urged the public to disregard false narratives circulated by Wogo Ihunda, members of the Rumosi community and their allies, and to recognize Colonel Eke and his family as the legitimate owners of the Agbada Esilaru land. Meanwhile, the people of Rumosi community in Obiakpo local government area of Rivers State have rejected the claims by Colonel Ogumerum Eke and his family over the rightful ownership of the land known as Agbada Isilaru, located along the New Airport Road. Chairman of Ike Kwaro Village, Rumosi Community, Ernest Wogo Ihunda, reacting to the statement issued by the legal representatives of the AK family, insisted that Rumosi lands were not part of the judgment being cited by Colonel AK. Wogo Ihunda recalled that in one of the suits, Colonel AK had approached the Rumosi community to testify as a neighboring community, wondering why the same person would now seek to grab their land under the guise of having a court judgment. He alleged that despite warnings from the court, Colonel AK and his associates have continued to use officers of the Nigeria Police Force to demolish properties on land not covered by the judgment. He called on the police to urgently intervene to prevent further damage.
Talk to you, knowing who we are as a land grabber, we enter Jonda so that I can tell court this our boundary, so that we know what is happening now. They are now invading our land with police, team of police now, bringing people's building down. In order to protect this, we enter Jonda. In that Jonda, Ogunike fine that had no matter with us, and we are aware that we have a pending matter with the community at the High Court. I have the process. The American they also file that the matter they are doing is along the SAS road, not along Obrikore, as the applicant seeking to join. And the name of the land is different. It's Agbada Esila. That Oyo Eboli Sumide is also pending in the High Court. And we enter with a discipline that the Council Court Choba with his team came and visited the locus and in all delivered that judgment, which I have my judgment.
Today FM's Uchendu Ojowo reports that excavating machines were demolishing buildings and grading lands, actions allegedly aided by police officers who were firing what appear to be live bullets and tear gas at some property owners. Indigenes of Rumosi, together with property owners in the area, earlier blocked the airport road in protest to draw the attention of the sole administrator and the Commissioner of Police to the situation. Some victims who spoke to newsmen expressed frustration and urged the police authorities to intervene immediately to protect them from what they describe as the activities of land grabbers.
It's quite unfortunate that the security agencies will join hands with the land grabbers to come and invade our land, Rumosi community. That security who are supposed to make peace with us are joining hands, and we don't want that. So that is why we are protesting that the security agencies should leave the place. They are supporting the land grabbers to invade our land, and we don't want that.
And subsequently, I was there. I asked the man leading them that he should show me the court execution order they came with and the bailiff that they are protecting. They brought the same judgment. No court order was brought. I have called the registrar of Choba Customary Court where they got that judgment from, and she confirmed to me that nothing came from their office to these people. That whoever that is here is doing an illegal work.
He have already executed the judgment. Somewhere else, the dispute plan is there. They get he now carry another dispute plan to another place to come and start executing. They have demolished all my land. They have demolished my house. Everything I live for university, they have finished it.
Today FM reports that the aggrieved property owners and community members later proceeded to the River State Government House where they presented their protest letter. Moving on, female students in tertiary institutions have reacted to the recent surge in cases of young women being murdered by their partners, particularly for ritual purposes. A cross-section of female students in River State who spoke to Today FM urged their peers to remain vigilant and alert to potential red flags in relationships. They identified several warning signs, including persistent harassment, sudden and unexplained displays of wealth, increased secrecy, and efforts to isolate victims from friends and family. The students attributed the disturbing trend to factors such as economic hardship, the desire for quick wealth, peer pressure, and family expectations, while emphasizing that no circumstance can justify such heinous acts.
And desperation, and the fact that our system is corrupt and nothing is working in this country, and with the inflation in the system, it doesn't justify what these guys are doing. That is just the truth. You can't take a life and justify. So social media is a big influence and plays a huge role in this. I really believe so, because a lot of people get this pressure and get this wrong mindset, from social media.
There's some men you don't go into relationship with, or guys with, that when you see the signs, when all these, should I call them irresponsible guys, men that live lavish lifestyle, and they don't even have a source of income, like you're not sure. So that's it. You cannot just date someone that you don't know what the person is doing.
Because of high rate of poverty. And from their mentality, they think that the only way forward is just them going through the easy way to success.
Get involved in ritual activities is because of greed, because of peer pressure, because they want to meet up. And another thing I think is because social media influences these things too much, because everybody there wants to.
Moving on to the foreign scene, a UN report says members of Syria's interim government forces, as well as fighters linked to the former regime, likely committed war crimes during sectarian violence in March that killed around 1,400 people, mainly civilians. The UN Syria Commission of Inquiry said it had found no evidence the authorities in Damascus had ordered the attacks. The violence along the coast, the heartland of the Alawite sect of Islam, exposed divisions after Islamist-led rebels removed former President Bashar al-Assad in December. It erupted as security forces were ambushed by groups loyal to the former regime, leading to clashes between government forces, largely Sunni Muslim, and Assad loyalists, mostly Alawites. The authorities sent reinforcements who were also joined by thousands of fighters, and the operation turned into revenge killings of a sectarian. According to the UN Commission, acts that likely amount to crimes, including war crimes, murder, torture, abductions, and inhuman acts related to the dead were committed by interim government force members as well as fighters linked to the Assad regime. The Commission called on the government, which launched an inquiry to expand accountability efforts. To end the news, here's a summary of the major stories. The federal government has condemned the ruling of a Canadian court which declared APC and PDP terrorist organizations. The River State government has announced plans to establish State Emergency Management Agency. You heard that residents have raised alarm over suspected monkeypox outbreak in Orashi region of River State. And on the foreign scene, we told you that the UN says war crimes were likely committed in Syria coastal violence. And that's the news, is edited by Ifunanya Obimendukwe. For comments and inquiries, please call 0818-389-2850 or send your emails to news@todayfmlive.com. You can also read our stories on www.todayfmlive.com. I'm Faustina Uputu. Good evening and thank you for listening.
Today's news, today's entertainment, today's sports, today's issues. Today on Today 95.1 FM, Port Harcourt.
Today 95.1 FM, where news meets insight, sports meets passion, and entertainment meets excellence. Expert analysis from seasoned professionals and our top analysts, informing, educating, and entertaining you. Your voice, your station. We are the voice of the people.
Say no to the ordinary. Embrace the extraordinary, because we are the voice of the people. Voice of the people. Today, 95.1 FM.
Today, 95.1 FM.
Hello and good evening once again. This is Today 95.1 FM, Voice of the People. And it's time again for a rundown of the foreign news stories that made the headlines on the world today. I'm Faustina Uputu. The headlines: Mali police arrest 2 generals in alleged coup plot. 26 dead, dozens missing in Lampedusa migrant shipwreck. Hong Kong tycoon Jimmy Lai's trial delays over health condition. Final preparations underway for Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska. Now the news in detail. We begin from Mali, where military rulers say they have arrested a group of military personnel and civilians, including 2 Malian generals, and a suspected French agent accused of attempting to destabilize the country. The announcement, which followed rumors in recent days of arrest of Malian army officers, was made by Mali's security minister, General Daoud Ali Mohamedine. He assured the audience that a full investigation was underway and that the situation is completely under control. The development comes amid an ongoing crackdown on dissent by Mali's military following a pro-democracy rally in May, the first since soldiers seized power nearly 4 years ago. The military provided few details about the alleged coup plotters, what it entailed, and the French national implicated in it, beyond identifying the man as Yann Vezelier. A United Nations report says the number of conflict-related sexual violence cases reported in 2024 increased by 25% from the previous year. According to the UN spokesman, Stefan Durajic, the highest number of cases was reported in the Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Haiti, Somalia, and South Sudan. It said 63 state and non-state parties are listed in the annex of the report, credibly suspected of committing or being responsible for patterns of rape and other forms of sexual violence in armed conflict, which is on the agenda of the Security Council. In Congo's Kivu alone, health workers treated more than 17,000 victims of sexual violence over just 5 months last year. Report chart shows more crimes like rape, gang rape, and sexual slavery. The United Nations says that 17 areas in Sudan are classified as at risk of famine, including parts of Darfur, the Nuba Mountains, Khartoum, and Jazeera. Stefan Dujarric, a UN spokesperson, says the World Food Programme is calling for humanitarian access to El Fasher, which is facing starvation and remains cut off from humanitarian assistance. Dujarric said some residents are living on animal fodder and food waste as a coping mechanism. He reiterated his concern about the ongoing conflict and renewed calls for all parties to end the violence and put the interests of their people first. The briefing comes as health officials in Sudan launched a 10-day cholera vaccination campaign in the capital, Khartoum, to curb what humanitarians call a rapidly spreading outbreak. Away from Africa to the rest of the world. A boat carrying nearly 100 migrants capsized off the Italian island of Lampedusa, killing at least 26 people and leaving about a dozen missing. A UNHCR spokesperson in Italy, Filippo Ungaro, says 60 survivors were brought to a center in Lampedusa. According to survivor accounts, there were 92 to 97 migrants on board when the boat departed Libya. Authorities were still searching for any remaining survivors. The Coast Guard said in a statement that the death toll stood at 26, but was still provisional and being updated. Palestinian officials have condemned far-right Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir's taunting visit to the jail cell of long-imprisoned Fatah leader Marwan Barghouti. In a footage of the visit shared on social media, it shows the minister making threatening remarks to the 66-year-old. The Palestinian Ministry of Foreign Affairs condemned the incident in the strongest terms. In a statement by the ministry says Ben-Gvir's actions were an unprecedented provocation and organized state terrorism, falling within the framework of the crimes of genocide, displacement and annexation faced by the prisoners and the people. He added that the Palestinian Authority will take the threat seriously and will follow up with the international community of the Red Cross, relevant states, the international community and its specialized organizations and councils. At least 164 people have died in the last 24 hours in heavy monsoon floods and landslides in Pakistan. Most of the deaths, 150, were recorded by disaster authorities in the mountainous Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in northern Pakistan. At least 30 homes were destroyed and a rescue helicopter crashed during operations, killing its 5 crew members. And 9 more people were killed in Pakistan-administered Kashmir, while 5 died in the northern Gilgit-Baltistan region. Government forecasters said heavy rainfall was expected until 21st August, and there is a heavy rain alert for the northwest of the country, and several regions have been declared disaster zones. And from India, a sudden burst of heavy rain has claimed dozens of lives in India-administered Kashmir and sparked frantic rescue efforts. The second recent disaster to underscore the vulnerability of those living in the Himalayas to the effects of extreme weather. At least 46 people have died and more than 200 are missing in the town of Choti, a popular pilgrimage destination for Hindu tourists. Flash floods caused by the rain turned roads into raging rivers, while the downpour devastated entire buildings and swept away vehicles with wall of water, mud and debris seen rolling down the mountainside. India's Meteorological Department said the rainfall was due to a cloudburst, which is a sudden and heavy downpour of over 100 millimeters of rain in just 1 hour, triggering sudden floods, landslides and devastation, especially in mountainous regions during the monsoon. Hong Kong judges have postponed the trial of media tycoon Jimmy Lai until he is provided with a heart monitoring device and related medication. Today's decision marked a second delay to the case this week after his lawyer said he had suffered heart palpitations. The 77-year-old founder of the Apple Daily newspaper is charged with foreign collusion under Hong Kong's national security law, which Beijing imposed following widespread pro-democracy protests in 2019. Closing arguments in the long-running trial were originally expected to begin yesterday, but all court sessions were suspended due to bad weather. As the court resumed earlier today, defense lawyer Robert Pang said that he had heart palpitations and had experienced the feeling of collapsing, but added that the tycoon did not want attention to be concentrated on his health. This week's visit to Lebanon of a senior Iranian politician, Ali Larijani, Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council, is seen as an attempt to smooth any feathers ruffled by rhetoric from Tehran about Hezbollah's disarmament. In early August, the Lebanese government, under pressure from the United States, announced that it would seek to disarm Hezbollah, long considered a principal ally of Tehran, by the end of the year. The group reacted angrily to the call to disarm, with its Secretary General Naim Qassem denouncing the idea earlier today and saying the Lebanese government does not have the right to question the resistance's legitimacy. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said in an interview last week that they support any decision the group makes but will not intervene. Foreign Minister Youssef Raji, who is from the anti-Hezbollah right-wing Lebanese Forces Party, said Araghchi's statement is firmly rejected and condemned. And from Geneva, global talks to develop a landmark treaty to tackle plastic pollution have once again failed to reach an agreement, despite efforts to strike a deal. Delegates at a closing meeting of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee in Geneva spoke of their dismay at the failure to break a deadlock at the sixth round of talks in less than 3 years, as countries remained deeply divided over the scope of any treaty. Cuba's delegate said that negotiators had missed a historic opportunity, but they have to keep going and acting accordingly, adding that the planet, present and future generations need this treaty. Final preparations are underway for the U.S.-Russia summit in Anchorage, Alaska, the United States. The one-on-one meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and U.S. President Donald Trump is scheduled for today in Anchorage. The summit is expected to be held in the joint base Elmendorf-Richardson, which is the largest military installation in Alaska. Media reporters were spotted outside the base with military personnel maintaining order yesterday. According to the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, Anchorage airspace will be closed today, with specific road restrictions in place due to security risks. That story from the United States concludes tonight's edition of The World Today, as produced by Uloma Ngosu of the News Department. But before we go, here's a summary of the stories that made the headlines. Mali has arrested 2 generals in an alleged coup plot. We told you that 26 died, dozens found missing in Lampedusa migrant shipwreck. You heard that Hong Kong tycoon Jimmy Lai's trial has been delayed over health conditions. And finally, you heard that final preparations for Trump-Putin meeting has been held in Alaska. Until same time next week, do have a lovely weekend. Thank you for listening. I am Faustina Uputu.
Stay informed, stay ahead. Tune in to Today 95.1 FM for the latest news and exciting sports updates. Your trusted source for everything you need to know. Today 95.1 FM, the voice of the people.
It's been an exciting week. It's been an awesome week. And just in case you missed out on our big stories this week, we got you covered. Rewind comes up every Saturday, 6:30 a.m. And here you get your total rundown of all the big stories and trends for the week in River State. And this is brought to you by your premium talk radio, Today 95.1 FM, Port Harcourt. Rewind, 6:30 a.m. every Saturday. Don't miss it.
BBC World Service, I'm Audrey Brown in London with Focus on Africa. What's behind a change in a decade-long US policy about selling certain kinds of weapons to Nigeria?
Now it's like a new sheriff in town with President Donald Trump wanting to do deal, and I think they've overlooked reports of human rights abuse and are willing to do business with Nigeria at this time.
From Sudan,
gold wasn't central in the economy of Sudan. Oil became the key driver of the economy starting from 2000 to 2010-11 when South Sudan became independent.
How the ongoing war has increased the shine of gold and revealed its tarnished underbelly. And a year on since Ghana passed a law promoting gender equality, how well is it working? That's all on the BBC Tonight in Focus. First, the news.
BBC News with Sue Montgomery. President Trump has said that Ukraine must decide whether to engage in any territorial deals with Russia. He was speaking to reporters in Air Force One on his way to Alaska for a key summit with Vladimir Putin.
They'll be discussed, but I've got to let Ukraine make that decision. And I think they'll make a proper decision. But I'm not here to negotiate for Ukraine. I'm here to get them at a table, and I think you have two sides. Look, Vladimir Putin wanted to take all of Ukraine. If I wasn't president, he would right now be taking all of Ukraine. But he's not going to do it.
President Zelensky said on social media that it was time to end the war and that Kyiv was counting on America to open a path towards a trilateral discussion with Ukraine, the United States and Russia. Torrential monsoon rains, which triggered flash floods and landslides in northwestern Pakistan, have killed more than 200 people in the past 24 hours. A helicopter helping the relief efforts has crashed, killing 5 people on board. Azadeh Moshiri reports from Islamabad.
The remaining helicopters and emergency teams are trying to reach survivors, as well as those left stranded by flooding and damaged roads. Homes have been destroyed and evacuations are ongoing. Some of the worst-hit areas include tourist attractions such as Swat, a lush green region in the western province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, as well as Pakistan-administered Gilgit-Baltistan in the north. For now, disaster authorities have warned intermittent flash floods are expected for another week.
Scientists in the United States have developed what they say is the world's first brain implant capable of translating people's thoughts into speech. The pea-sized device records neural activity, then uses a computer algorithm to turn it into spoken words. The chip is at an early stage, but researchers hope it could eventually help those who've lost the ability to speak. Benjamin Abramovich Krasa, the co-author of the research, says it's a breakthrough.
It is a really amazing potential technology for people who have lost the ability to speak. The hope with our paper is that by showing that it is possible with imagined speech or inner speech, that it'll allow people to really communicate quickly and comfortably and freely.
Several Palestinians were reportedly injured in overnight attacks by Jewish settlers on Palestinian villages in the occupied West Bank. In the first incident, a man and his wife were wounded in the southern village of Susia after their home was attacked. Soon after, settlers are said to have hurled Molotov cocktails at homes and vehicles in another village before wounding 3 men by gunfire in a third. There are no reports of any arrests. The attacks come amid a recent spike in settler violence. BBC News. Officials in Sweden have urged residents of the capital Stockholm to cut back in using tap water for the next few weeks because of a shortage blamed on high temperatures. About 1.5 million people and businesses are affected. The authorities say supplies are being disrupted by unusually warm freshwater temperatures at the lake where Stockholm gets its drinking water. The leader of Hezbollah has warned the Lebanese government that its push to disarm the group could plunge the country into civil war. Naim Qassem said the policy amounted to handing the country to Israel. Here's Mike Thompson.
Under pressure from the US, the Lebanese government has ordered the army to devise a plan to disarm Hezbollah by the end of this year. The policy has sparked a furious reaction from the leader of the group, which was better armed than the Lebanese military before its bruising war with Israel. Naim Qassem warned that the government would bear responsibility for an internal explosion and destruction of Lebanon that could leave no life in the country. Despite a ceasefire in November, Israel has pledged to continue attacks on Hezbollah military targets until the group is disarmed.
President Cyril Ramaphosa has urged South Africans to come together to find solutions to the country's many challenges. He was speaking at a meeting to set the agenda for a months-long national dialogue. Addressing the convention in Pretoria, Mr. Ramaphosa said South Africa was facing economic hardship, unemployment, inequality and growing poverty. The Thai royal family has given a medical update on the king's eldest daughter, who's been unconscious in hospital for nearly 3 years. The palace said Princess Pacharagittayapa Mahedon had suffered a severe blood infection. It's the first public information about her condition in more than 2 years. She fell ill with a heart condition in December 2022. BBC News.
Hello, I'm Audrey Brown, and coming up today in Focus on Africa, what's behind a change in a decade-long U.S. policy about selling certain kinds of weapons to Nigeria? We'll also be in Sudan, investigating how the war is driving a new demand for gold after the metal had lost its shine in the late 20th century.
Gold was central in the exports and the economy of Sudan during the 90s. Oil became the key driver of the economy starting from 2000 to 2010-11 when South Sudan became independent. That was, the decade of the oil.
And from Ghana, a year on since a monumental law to grant parity to women in public and private leadership roles came into effect, activists reflect.
It took about 25 years of work, hard work, to see this come into being. And that is why we need to use the same momentum and activism with which the act was passed to see its implementation. Because if we relax, it will just be another law in our books. As you know, laws don't implement themselves.
It's Friday, the 15th of August. First, we go to Nigeria. The U.S. government is selling nearly $350 million worth of weapons to Abuja. The U.S. State Department has approved the sale, but it needs the all clear from their Congress. This package includes bombs, ammunition, and rockets. The Pentagon put out a statement saying it will help the government in Abuja to fight terrorist organizations and counter illicit trafficking in Nigeria and the Gulf of Guinea. But back in 2014, the Obama administration refused to sell arms to Nigeria over concerns that the weapons would be used to violate the rights of civilians in conflict areas. doesn't mean the U.S. didn't continue to sell arms to Nigeria. For instance, the Biden administration sold attack helicopters and other arms worth nearly $1 billion in 2022. That sale was first blocked by the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee due to concerns over human rights, but it later went through. Now, as we've discussed many times, Nigeria faces instability on many fronts. Boko Haram and other Islamist military groups in the northeast, heavily armed gangs terrorizing people in the Middle Belt with kidnappings and robbery, and the oil-rich southeastern Delta region is never tranquil. The country clearly has a use for arms. But what has changed in the U.S. attitude to selling Nigeria certain kinds of arms? Chris Ewoko is our correspondent in Abuja. We began our conversation by discussing what exactly Nigeria is buying this time around.
The package includes over 1,000 general-purpose bombs. These are bombs that are part of the United States Mark 80 series that can be dropped from the air without being guarded. They've been primarily used by the U.S. Air Force before now. There are other weapons like more than 5,000 precision-guided rockets. These are requested by the Ministry of Defense in Nigeria to try to help the military in the fight against insurgency in the northeast, as well as deal with the criminal gangs they say are terrorizing the northwest of the country, as well as the middle belt and other parts of the country where we've seen spate of kidnapping rising in recent times.
Bombs, though, have the Nigerian armed forces used bombs in the past?
Yes, indeed. As a matter of fact, they've been using bombs, carrying out airstrikes, and in such situations, we've also seen when the military or the Air Force mistakenly target civilians. And it was one of the reasons that in the past, especially in 2014, during the Obama's administration, the U.S. government refused to sell lethal weapons to Nigeria based on concerns of the human rights record of the military. But now it's like a new sheriff in town with President Donald Trump wanting to do deal, and I think they've overlooked reports of human rights abuse and are willing to do business with Nigeria at this time.
So are Nigerians concerned about this? If since 2014 the U.S. hasn't sold weapons to Nigeria and now they are Nigerians worried?
No, not exactly. But I mean, after 2014, there was a kind of deal reached around 2020, 2021 during the Joe Biden administration under President Muhammadu Buhari, when Nigeria got some 6 Tucano helicopters delivered to it. But after that, there was also a halt from the U.S. lawmakers, still on the basis of Nigeria government's human rights record. Talking about Nigerians being concerned, right now Nigerians are concerned more about their security and how it seems that the military is overwhelmed in trying to address some of the challenges, the multiple security challenges they've been facing. We have the Boko Haram insurgency in the northeast, also the newer group that have emerged as well, that's ISWAP, also in the northeast. We've also had criminal gangs known locally as bandits in the northwest that engage in kidnapping. In central Nigeria, we've also seen clashes, killings of people in their villages. And again, in the southwest, we've seen agitation. This has stretched the military. So most Nigerians care more about their security situation than what the Americans might feel about wanting to sell arms or not to the country.
$346 million. I don't know if that's a lot because I don't know a lot about arms deals. But I do know that arms deals are notoriously opaque. I'm just wondering whether there are concerns around how much of that actually goes towards weapons, because people have been complaining in Nigeria that the army is understaffed, that money that is meant to go into buying weapons in order to deal with insurgencies just hasn't, made its way there. So are those concerns being felt right now and being expressed?
Well, Audrey, I can tell you that the Nigerian military or the Nigerian defense sector is one of the biggest recipients of funds in Nigeria. They are so highly funded. That's what's making many of Nigerians angry, because despite the huge funds allocated to the defense sector, to the military, they don't seem to see evidence of these funds reflecting the actions of the military in terms of ensuring that the country is secured. The over $300 million arms deal was actually announced by the U.S. government, so we can say that the figure can be trusted. But this is not the first time. The other 6 Tucano aircraft were valued at over $500 million. And even before then, there was another one close to about $900 million, even though that one was blocked in 2021. The defense sector is well funded, but Nigerians are not happy that they're not seeing what the amount of money they are getting is reflecting on their well-being, on their safety, and the safety of the territorial integrity of the country.
That's the BBC's Chris Ewoko in Abuja. If you are a regular listener to Focus on Africa, and I know that you are, you know that we cover the war in Sudan and its devastating impact regularly. Today, we turn our attention to one of the resources beneath Sudan's soil. It's not oil, it's gold. And the two things are not unrelated. The war between Sudan Armed Forces and its surrogate, the Rapid Support Forces paramilitary group, broke out in April 2023. As a result, agricultural production has gone down as people have had to leave their homes and their crops as fighting raged around them. Sudan used to produce oil before the oil-producing regions split to form South Sudan back in 2011. So it lost much of that revenue on which the country relied. Gold production was stepped up to make up the shortfall, the war notwithstanding. In fact, research by the Chatham House Africa program earlier this year showed that sales of gold are the major source of funding for the war. Both the army and the RSF are involved in the trade. Suleiman Baldo is a Sudan expert and co-author of a research paper called Gold and the War in Sudan. He's been telling me about the less than shiny role of gold in the country.
Historically, Sudan, the land of the black people, has been rich in gold from times immemorial. You know, this is the pharaonic dynasties in northern Sudan. The invasion by the Ottoman Empire was also motivated by, the search and exploitation of gold in the country. But more recently, there has been a gold rush around the year 2009, 2008, at which point Sudan was the producer of about 30 tons per year in average, all exported. And then all of a sudden, because of the rush of unemployed youth and populations into the desert savanna lands of Sudan, searching for gold through artisanal means, production started jumping to an average of 80 tons per year. From 2015 up to the 2023 when the war broke out in Sudan.
So Sudan has always been known for its gold, and it was central to the attentions in the 18th century, I would imagine, with the Ottoman Empire, the invasion and so on, for gold.
Yeah.
But it seems like if you're saying that it produced about 30 tons of gold a year, did gold production sort of move to the side of Sudan's wealth? And then let's not forget South Sudan, where most of the oil is, became independent. Is that why gold then suddenly became more important in Sudan?
Gold wasn't central in the exports and the economy of Sudan during the 90s. Oil became the key driver of the economy starting from 2000 to 2010-11 when South Sudan became independent. That was, the decade of the oil. And during that period, oil was the main wealth and the main resource of the country. But with the independence of South Sudan in 2011, more than 75% of the oil reserves were taken away by the new state, South Sudan, and Sudan suddenly found itself in the middle of a major economic crisis. This is precisely when the gold rush began among Sudanese youth who were pressed by the economic crisis to venture into artisanal gold mining.
So was this an organized force of young people going out to go and look for gold in, traditional gold lands? Or was it something that they were compelled to do because they were no longer working in the oil fields and they needed money and they knew where the gold was, so that's where they went?
The oil production wasn't a large employer of youth, but it infused certain vitality into the economy, and there was a trickle-down effect whereby there was a level of economic growth. And at the same time, with millions of youth were compelled to seek alternative incomes by venturing into artisanal gold mining.
Where in Sudan is the gold found?
Gold is found about 14 states out of Sudan's 18. That is to say, it is all over the country, but with different concentrations and different production levels. For instance, the states of the Red Sea and River Nile alone are responsible for the production of more than 60% of all of Sudan golds.
Now, you said that it's young men mining artisanally and that it wasn't necessarily organized when it started. They were compelled by a very bad economic situation. But we do know that 80 tons of gold cannot just leave the country like that. It needs organization. Who is organizing it? Who buys the gold?
To answer that question, we need to take into account the fact that more than 80 to 85% of Sudan's total gold production is produced by artisanal miners. That is to say, by this more than 1 million people who are working manually, getting nuggets of gold, processing them through mercury, then selling them to traders. And therefore, the government, to organize the trade in gold and the economic returns for the national economy, set up a system of what they call gold markets, which are places where all the services that the artisanal miners need to sell their finds of gold were compelled to go, and therefore the government could collect some revenue by taxing. But it's a very weak system with a lot of loopholes that led to a large percentage of Sudan gold being smuggled rather than officially exported.
So how is it smuggled out of the country? Do you know which are the sort of routes through which it goes?
Smuggling is carried out by artisanal miners across the nearest border, or small gold traders across the nearest border, when official policies for the purchase of gold constitute sort of an incentive for smuggling by being not fair for artisanal miners and small-scale traders. But the largest smugglers are state-owned enterprises controlled and operated by the Sudan National Army, National Intelligence Services, and also the private companies that belong to the Rapid Support Forces, and then smuggle it or export it off the books without declaring it as official export to the Central Bank of Sudan.
Suleiman Baldo, a Sudan expert and co-author of the research paper Gold and the War in Sudan. And now to Ghana.
Those in favor of the third reading of the bill, say aye. Aye. Those against, say no. The ayes have it.
That's the moment the Gender Equality Act was voted into law by Ghana's parliamentarians in July last year. It marked a victory for women's rights. This is Patricia Apiaje, an MP and one of the main proponents of the bill, speaking to reporters immediately after its successful passage on the 30th of July, 2024.
Today, the Parliament of Ghana has crossed a milestone. I must say I'm highly delighted that my presence here in Parliament for 3 terms, we've been able to pass the affirmative action bill into a law. And I want to assure all members that one of the things that you have to pay attention to is that we call it the affirmative action bill or the act, but in brackets we bring the word equity. Gender Equity Act.
In this historic move, Ghana joined Rwanda, Uganda, Burundi, South Africa, Mozambique, among other countries that have working affirmative action laws. The main intention of the act is to allow women to take their rightful place in leadership positions across society, in both the public and private sectors. In the words of the act, lawmakers would do more to create a free and just society, to liberate more women, to support us develop Mother Ghana. And that's the end of the quote. So what has changed in the past year? Let's hear from people in Ghana.
We're seeing some improvements. For one, we have the first female vice president ever in Ghana.
Not much has changed because when the affirmative action was passed, we wanted more inclusivity of women in our parliament, but just in the election, so just about 15% of women being represented in parliament. But one huge change that we've also seen has to do with Ghana's first female vice president.
Those voices from Ghana. But let's take a broader look at the law and what needs to be done to make it viable. Professor Deborah Atobra is the director of the Center for Gender Studies and Advocacy at the University of Ghana.
Ghana's Affirmative Action Gender Equity Act seeks to address systemic and historical inequalities that have created gender barriers in Ghana. These barriers also affect Ghana's development and the welfare and well-being of people. And so this act actually gives the legislative backing to promote gender equality in the country. It's just been 1 year since it's been passed. And so we know we have targets around appointments to positions of power and decision-making and leadership, but we haven't seen any significant changes there. We still have, men disproportionately occupying positions of power. So it's very important that we look at these targets and see to the speedy implementation of the Act. But having said that, I know also that civil society organizations have done a number of activities to commemorate the 1 year celebration. And I want to mention especially the Affirmative Action Coalition convened by Sheila Menka Premo, but also a number of think tanks have held policy dialogue around it to see how far we have gone and how we could accelerate the implementation of the Act. There's also a technical working group which was working on the LI to set up guidelines for implementation. But at the same time also, we realized the majority of Ghanaians did not know about the Act. They knew an Act had been passed, but they didn't know the elements, the various activities and interventions and quotas which were prescribed in the Act. So the Act, first of all, has quotas for women's inclusion in leadership. And this relates to political appointments, to the legislature, to the executive, to ministries, departments, and agencies. And so it's hoped that, ultimately by 2034, would have gender parity, 50-50. But this will be incremental. Not many people also know that the Act extends to the private sector, and so that men and women will have equal access to employment and also to leadership within the sector. And the very nice part also is that there are incentives, and so institutions have to submit their gender equity reports and show compliance, and that enables them to get some tax incentives. Not many people know about this. It may interest you to know that it took about 25 years of work, hard work by the Affirmative Action Coalition to see this come into being. And that is why we think that we must not rest on our oars. We need to use the same momentum and activism with which the Act was passed to see its implementation, because our fear is that if we relax, it will just be another law in our books. As you know, laws don't implement themselves. People do. And, many may assume that this is a luxury. It doesn't need to be prioritized. But considering the fact that it has direct implications for our development. And there's all the data, there's so much data to show that when we promote gender equality, we ultimately promote the well-being of the entire society, not just women and children, everybody. And so
what is that saying?
What
is that saying? You educate a man, you educate one person, you educate a woman, you educate a village or a town or a country, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Many people like statistics. So the World Economic Forum, for instance, has reported that if we are able to achieve full gender equality by 2043, then we would lift about 53 million people in Africa from extreme poverty.
Professor Deborah Atobra, Director of the Center for Gender Studies and Advocacy at the University of Ghana. Focus on Africa was created by Tom Kavanagh, Stefania Okereke, and Nyasha Michelle here in London. Charles Kitonga was hard at work in Nairobi. Patricia Whitehorn was the senior journalist in charge. Philip Bull was the technical producer. I'm Audrey Brown, and we'll talk again next time.
Talk radio.
I listen to a lot of talk radio.
95.1 FM.
What's a successful business without sales? And what is sales without an audience? Well, do you know that you can reach 8 million listeners across 6 states in 2 geopolitical zones all at once? How? With Today 95.1 FM, you can get millions of people to know about your business. And what does that mean to you? More sales. Call 081 389 2850 now for more information.
Plenty killing from my life, now who I choose.